It's very easy for power to shift sides. Europe's past was shaped for hundreds of years by the killing of kings or writers. We'll talk about 6 crimes from the Middle Ages that changed the course of European history in big ways. The murder of Charles the Good. Although Charles was born in Denmark, his mother escaped to Flanders after his father was slain. Charles was born in Denmark. As a result of his mother's eventual marriage to an Italian duke, Charles was left in the care of his grandparents in Flanders. Charles participated in the Crusades and was presented with the opportunity to wear the crown of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, he declined the offer for reasons that are not known. Following the passing of his cousin, Charles was appointed to the position of Count of Flanders and became the heir to his predecessor. Charles drove Jews from Flanders and blamed them for a famine that occurred in his province when he was serving as count. In addition to this, he took measures to minimize the price gouging of grains and provided bread to those who were less fortunate. Consequently, the Ehrenbald family, who were overpricing grains for the purpose of financial gain, were directly harmed by this, and they went on to arrange his murder. When Charles was killed, he was kneeling in prayer on the morning of March 2nd, 1127. He was struck down and killed. A band of knights armed with swords launched an assault on him, a civil war that lasted for a long time and disrupted the balance of power in Europe was ignited by the horrible murder that sparked popular anger. After that, the King of France named William Clito to the position of the future Count of Flanders, which was a region that France and England fought over for a considerable amount of time in the aftermath.
The murder of Geoffrey Chaucer. The English poet Geoffrey Chaucer was born in London in 1343 and is often regarded as one of the most talented poets of the Middle Ages. In October of 1400, he was the first poet to be laid to rest at Poets' Corner, which is located within Westminster Abbey. One of the most well-known works of his is the Canterbury Tales, and it is commonly believed that he was instrumental in the dissemination of English as a language through his writing. It was during Chaucer's time that he received a lot of praise. In light of this, he was granted a number of posts by royalty, which enabled him to lead a life that was extremely pleasant. As a result of the fact that a tomb was not constructed in Chaucer's honour until 100 years after his passing, it is not known exactly how and when Chaucer passed away. The south transept of Westminster Abbey, which is located in Poets' Corner, is now open for visitors to view Chaucer. As a result, there is a growing body of evidence suggesting that he was, in fact, murdered. He is said to have been murdered due to the fact that his writings contained heretical statements against King Richard II. If Chaucer had lived, he would have been a well-known enough writer to have been able to contribute to the overthrow of the monarch. There are also many who believe that if he had been suffering from an illness or had some kind of premonition that his death was close, then he would have left behind manuscripts and further works. Having said that, it is possible that the course of history would have been altered if the most famous poet of his day had lived longer, so that he could have produced more manuscripts and poems and expressed more concerns about the leadership of the country.
The assassination of John the Fearless. Between the years 1404 and 1419, John the Fearless served as the Duke of Burgundy. Due to the fact that the king was suffering from mental illness, Louis of Orleans and John the Fearless were open competitors. Both men were eager to fill the power hole that the king's illness had created. Both of them made threats against one another in public until their uncle forced them to make a solemn vow to cease. On the other hand, John went ahead and ordered the murder of Louis in the streets a few days later. It was via his assertion that Louis was murdered for having an affair with his wife that he was able to win back the favour of the king. Although John was exonerated by the king for this offence, the rest of his life was not an easy one. Henry, King of England, attempted to seize control of France, while the King of France, who suffered from mental illness, continued to rule the realm. John was likewise interested in power, but he chose to support France because of concern that he would lose his favour among the general populace. John and his troops finally took control of Paris, despite the fact that social turmoil continued. John envisioned himself as the king's guardian and defender. The Dauphin Charles, who who was in charge of various territories in France, convened a meeting in order to consolidate his power with that of John and to assist France in becoming more powerful in its conflict with England. It was at this meeting that Charles's men carried out the murder of John. In his defense, Charles asserts that he was not aware of the intentions of his men and that he did not pay for the killing. It was the assassination of John the Fearless that sparked the conflict that would later be known as the 100 Years' War in France.
The murderous Queen Isabella. She was frequently referred to as the She-Wolf of France, and there was a good reason for this affectionate nickname. Not only did Isabella dislike the company that her husband Edward kept, but she also did not enjoy the oppressive attitude that he exhibited. 1325 years ago, when her marriage had reached its breaking point, she began an affair with Roger Mortimer, and the two of them planned to assassinate Edward. Historians are in a heated debate about the circumstances surrounding Edward's death, and there are numerous hypotheses. Some people believe that Isabella used a hot poker to kill Edward on her own. Others claim that he passed away due to his poor health when he was being held captive. Others continue to assert that Isabella gave the order for him to be murdered. In all likelihood, Isabella had a great deal to gain by executing Edward. She would be able to be with her lover, and she would be able to acquire Edward's kingdom, which she accomplished in the end. The nation's appearance was irrevocably altered following his passing, regardless of the circumstances. Isabella had a propensity for spending money and purchasing land. The country was thrown into a major state of public upheaval as a result of Isabella's accumulation of enormous wealth, as well as her questionable relationships with foreign nations. She was eventually removed from power by her son, Edward, in the year 1330. Isabella was required to hand back a significant portion of the land that she had gained while she was in power, despite the fact that Edward successfully lined his mother's pockets. Isabella experienced periods of insanity after Mortimer passed away, which was also in the year 1330. There is a possibility that the world will never know whether or not she murdered her first spouse. The murder of Richard I. Richard I had a passion for warfare. In addition, he was aware that the war was expensive and that he could not raise all of the funds through taxes. When he arrived in France, he went to the castle Châlus-Chabrol in the hopes of finding a pot of gold there. At the time that Richard was attempting to take control of the castle, he was killed by a bow and arrow. Richard extended his congratulations to the young man who accurately shot him. A few days later, in April of 1199, Richard passed away at the age of 41 as a result of wounds that had developed gangrenous. The youngster was ultimately executed for the murder, despite the fact that he had offered him a reward for his assistance. To what extent would Richard have been able to expand his territory if he had lived? Are there significant differences across the borders of Europe? As a result of the war, how many additional lives would be lost? Additionally, Richard was a Christian crusader who disseminated a message that was hostile toward Jews. His sexuality was also a topic of widespread debate among historians, and he did not leave any children or grandchildren to succeed to the throne. This led to his brother John succeeding him as the leader of the family. Due to the fact that the French regions did not acknowledge John as king, the Angevin Empire began to fall apart as a direct consequence of this. The stabbing of Arthur of Brittany. Arthur of Brittany, who was born in 1187, was the leader of the uprising against King John, despite the fact that he was still a little boy at the time. In addition to being the king's nephew, he desired to take the throne for himself. John's soldiers were successful in capturing him and subsequently incarcerating him in Rouen Castle. It is not known exactly what happened to him after that, but it is certain that he was murdered somewhere in the future. According to the rumors, John gave the order to have him castrated and blinded, but his captors did not have the stomach for such a violent act. Following the receipt of this information, John became extremely intoxicated and proceeded to knife Arthur to death. In the year 1203, a fisherman was the one who eventually found the body of Arthur, which had been dumped in the Seine River. Only 16 years old at the time he was. It was decided to give Arthur a funeral that was kept a secret so that John would not find out.
The death of King Arthur had an impact on none other than William Shakespeare, who wrote the play King John, which was first performed in 1623. In addition, Arthur's death resulted in his sister being incarcerated for the rest of her life, which prevented her from succeeding him in the position she had. Alix of Thouars, Arthur's half-sister, was the one who succeeded him instead. However, she was never quite able to exercise power over a significant portion of her property, primarily because of King John.